We begin with the uncertainty surrounding next week's federal budget. It's not clear if Mark Carney and his government has the votes to pass it before it's even unveiled. 171 votes are needed to get the budget through the House of Commons. The Liberals have 168 votes in the can. Conservatives say they'll vote against it. That's 144 votes. The Bloc Québécois and its 22 MPs have also suggested they can't support the budget. So, who's left? Well, 7 NDP MPs and 1 Green MP. The Liberals need 3 of their votes. The CBC's Kate McKenna and JP Tasker have been speaking to sources from various parties, and they join me now. You can read their full article online at CBCNews.ca. JP, what are you hearing? Let's start there.
Yeah, we spoke to a number of senior Conservative sources who say the party leadership does not want an election right now, but they also don't want to vote for the new Liberal government's first budget, fearing that that would be a signal that they're propping up the Prime Minister and supporting an agenda that they really don't support. So there are conversations happening behind the scenes between the opposition parties about cobbling together enough votes to get the budget over the line. Those conversations include the Conservatives speaking to the Bloc Québécois and the NDP about a path forward. At this stage, the Conservative sources we have spoken to say the working assumption is the most expected resolution to this is that some NDP MPs will abstain on the vote. We also spoke to one senior NDP source who says that they also think the most likely scenario right now is that a number, some, possibly all, who knows, NDP MPs will abstain, which means that the budget can clear the House of Commons and there will be no Christmas election. I should also say we heard from sources who were inside the Conservative caucus room yesterday that the party leadership was telling Conservative MPs to back off the NDP, to not criticize the NDP, to not denigrate the NDP, to kind of lay off them, which is a change in strategy from the past when you'll remember Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was scathing in his criticism of Jagmeet Singh, the former leader. And of course, the party ran a number of attack ads against the NDP in the months before the last federal vote. Now they're saying take it easy with the NDP. That came up in the caucus discussion. It was separate from the budget discussion, but it is interesting timing that they're having this conversation as they are also speaking to the NDP about what they're going to do with the budget vote. One other interesting tidbit that came out of that caucus meeting that a source relayed to me is that the Conservatives will allow MPs who have pre-approved travel over the next few weeks when there is expected to be budget votes. They can go ahead with that travel as long as they can vote electronically remotely. So they're not insisting that all Conservative MPs stay in Ottawa, be physically in the West Block for any budget votes that could come up, which is also maybe a change.
Right.
In the past, you want to have all your MPs in line sitting there in the chamber if you're worried about how a budget vote is going to go.
Okay, but they would have to be in Canada because the app does require you to be in Canada to vote. So international travel could be an issue unless you want to be out of the country. So that's one less vote to worry about. Okay, so Kate, what other scenarios are possible here based on your joint reporting?
Well, it's not out of the realm of possibility that some Conservatives might end up sitting this one out as well. In fact, Pierre Poilievre was asked explicitly in French earlier this week, are you going to force all of your MPs to vote? And at that point, he did not answer. He said, they want to see an affordable budget, not biting on that question at all. And one of the sources I spoke with really went out of his way to underscore that in his view, this drama is not contrived. This is a very real scenario that they might not have the votes to get this done. And part of what was concerning him and other sources I spoke with is this idea that the math could end up being wrong. They might think they have 1 or 2 votes to get them across the finish line, but then something could happen. The Liberals might see their own budget. There might be people inside their caucus who don't like their budget. They might think they have the votes with 1 or 2 extra. And then it comes time to vote, and there's some arrangement that's been made, and they actually don't have the votes, and the government falls. So these are all things that are kind of percolating, but it is worth mentioning that the government does seem to be quite actively trying to engage with opposition parties, including the Bloc Québécois. I'm told that the finance minister met the leader of the Bloc Québécois quite recently, in fact. And we saw today one of the pre-budget announcements targeting a loophole in trucking. That was something that the Bloc Québécois has asked for. Now, as we wrote in our story, the demands from the opposition at this point, it doesn't look like they're likely to be fulfilled. Like the Bloc Québécois are quite expensive. The Conservatives say they want the deficit to stay where it is. Mark Carney's indicated it won't. But, these conversations are ongoing. the government does seem to be at least partially responsive to that. So still clearly a very fluid situation. We'll see how it unfolds over the next week.
Okay, JP Tasker, Kate McKenna, you can read the full story at CBCNews.ca/politics. Thank you so much. Good work. All right, we're going to get some reaction from some of the MPs. Heather McPherson is an Alberta NDP MP. She's also running to be NDP leader, and she joins me now. Heather McPherson, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Don Davies, the interim leader, says he wants to wait and see what's in the budget before he makes a decision. Is that the position of your caucus? Because there's some suggestion that maybe some people have already decided they're voting no.
So Don obviously speaks for the caucus, and I am here obviously as a leadership candidate. Listen, we're going to wait and see what's in this budget, but everything we've heard from Mark Carney makes me think this is going to be a really hard budget for the New Democrats to support. I mean, he's talking about cuts to services that Canadians depend upon. He's talking about things that will put people in a more precarious position. He's telling Canadians they're going to have to tighten their belt, but Canadians are already doing that,
right.
And Canadians are deeply concerned about their jobs. You know, we saw 3,000 jobs flee Canada with Stellantis. Just today, we know that there's going to be about 120 steel workers that are going to lose their jobs, and they're going to be moved to India tomorrow if the government doesn't take immediate steps. You know, this Prime Minister, he can make a choice. This is his decision to decide whether or not he wants an election. Mark Carney will decide if he wants an election. If he doesn't want an election, he better put things in that budget that New Democrats can support. And that means there can't be cuts to the public services. There can't be cuts to those things that Canadians depend upon.
So which public services? Because here's what I'm trying to assess. We hear from New Democrats and that some people in caucus want to vote against this. Some people want to sit it out. They don't want to go to an election. You're obviously in this leadership race. There's a belief that the country does not want an election. And unless it's a radical departure filled with poison pills, find a way to let this budget pass. I mean, is that a fair assessment of the thinking? Or is it really quite possible that you're also tired of being the party that's branded as letting the Liberals off the hook because of the confidence and supply agreement?
Listen, let me tell you. I'll say it one more time. This is up to the Prime Minister.
Sure.
If he is governing, it is his job to work with the parties and find a way to get his budget passed, if that's what he wants to do. But if he's tired of being the Prime Minister and wants to go back to Canadians...
I don't think he is, but yes.
That's his choice to make.
Okay,
you can't put that on the shoulders of the parties if he has not done the work of making sure that he has those votes. That's his job. That's his cabinet's job to do, and he's not doing it. So if we get this budget on November 4th, and we see investments in jobs, if we see investments in, if those big nation-building projects across this country are in fact going to get Canadian workers working, are going to be built with Canadian materials, then there's a much better chance of him getting that budget passed than if he comes in with an austerity budget, because an austerity budget just means cutting services that Canadians depend upon, and New Democrats can't support that. We don't believe in that.
So the promise has been, while they do say there is going to be the cost efficiency review or whatever the exact wording is, there will be some cuts over the next 3 years or reallocations, or they say the job losses will be mostly done through attrition. We'll see. But they have promised to protect transfers to individuals and transfers to provinces, and the social programs that were largely grown out of your supply and confidence agreement with the Trudeau government will not be touched. Is that enough? If they live up to those promises, is that enough, or is there more?
David, I'm thinking about these folks that are calling my constituency office, and they are calling because they can't get through to CRA. They can't get a passport. They can't get through to the immigration office. Those folks that are going to their MPs across this country because the Canadian government is not doing the job that they're supposed to do, and then Mr. Carney tells Canadians that there's going to be more cuts, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get harder on Canadians. Well, they can't afford groceries. Well, they can't afford housing. Well, we have deep, infrastructure deficits in our cities. I mean, we're going to need to see a budget that recognizes that right now Canadians are struggling, and it's not time for Canadians to tighten their belt. It's time for this government to invest in Canadians so that Canadian jobs are protected, so that Canadian workers know that they'll be able to pay their bills, they'll be able to buy groceries. That's what we need to see from this budget.
But when you say no cuts to public services, does that mean no reductions in public servants, or does that just mean no cuts in services to Canadians? Because there's lots of ways you can do this in a budget, right?
Well, we'll see what Mr. Carney decides to do. But frankly, for me, I look at the services provided by those those folks and I look at the jobs that those folks depend upon, and I'm deeply worried that Mr. Carney doesn't quite understand how important that is to Canadians.
On the parliamentary conversations we heard JP Tasker and Kate McKenna talking about, are you aware of any back and forth conversations between the New Democrats and the Conservatives about how to manage this thing to avoid triggering an election if it's required?
I am not.
You're not?
No.
Okay. So when you talk about Mr. Davies, who's on saying they want to do a wait and see speaking for the caucus, do you have a sense that the caucus is fully unified on what they want to see in this budget and that they will vote as a group of 7 no matter what?
I mean, one thing I will say is that I find it odd that both the Bloc and the Conservatives have said that they would vote against a budget they haven't seen. You know, we are going to take the time to look at what's in this budget, to see what's there. From everything Mr. Carney has said so far, I'm finding it extraordinarily difficult to think the New Democrats will be able to support this budget. But that said, we are going to take a look at it. We are going to see what's there. I know I'm going to be meeting with my colleagues, with my caucus colleagues, and we're going to be talking about it on November 4th. We'll look at what's there. We'll look at what the Liberals are putting forward. Listen, we want to work with the government. We want to get help for Canadians. Canadians need support right now. We want to get that support for them. But like I said at the beginning, if Mark Carney wants an election, Mark Carney will get an election. This is in his hands. This is up to him.
So your bottom line on the austerity point, just as a final question here, Ms. McPherson, the Prime Minister did use the word austerity, but then he also gave those caveats that I mentioned, right, about transfers. I mean, what would austerity look like, I guess is my question, because he used that phrase, but then the reassurances sort of walked away from it. And it wasn't clear to me at this point, and we will find out November 4th exactly what it means.
And how reassured do you think most Canadians were
when
he started off with,
we're
going to cut stuff that you depend on, but don't worry, we're not going to cut stuff, but we are going to cut stuff. But tighten your belt, but don't worry.
Right, but I don't
think that's very reassuring from the Prime Minister.
What is your definition of what true austerity would look like in a budget? That would just be, on principle, a bridge too far for the New Democrats.
Honestly,
I mean,
if there are things in there that are hurting Canadians, that's going to be a problem for us. It's going to be a big problem for us.
Okay, Heather McPherson, we're going to talk probably November 4th or the days after. Thanks so much. That's NDP MP Heather McPherson. Okay, so as we've been discussing, Prime Minister Mark Carney needs the support of 3 opposition MPs to pass his first budget. So far, he does not have that guarantee, something the government House leader says puts the chance of an early election in the hands of the opposition.
I don't think Canadians want a Christmas election. Mr. Carney, the Liberal Party, does not want a Christmas election, but it appears that Mr. Poilievre in particular perhaps would like to have a Christmas election.
Andrew Scheer is the Conservative House leader. He was watching that clip there with Stephen McKinnon. You heard that. Does your leader want a Christmas election? Do you buy this line from Mr. McKinnon?
Well, I believe that it's the Liberals that are trying to use the conversation around their costly budget who want a costly election. Here we are a few days out of the budget presentation, and we should be talking about what should be in the budget. Conservatives believe we should have an affordable budget so that Canadians can have an affordable life. We've called for a commitment to the Liberals to keep to their deficit promise of just $42 billion. That's already insanely high, but it certainly shouldn't be even higher. We've called for measures to reward work, to lower taxes on home building, to lower taxes on food to help bring grocery prices down. So we've kind of set out what we would like to see in the budget. It's up to the government. Every parliament I've ever been in that's been a minority government, it's been up to the government to work with opposition parties to put some things there that will be palatable. Right. And that if there's speculation around an election, it's because the Liberals are driving that to distract from their terrible record and the suffering that Canadians are going through.
Well, where do things stand on your negotiations? Because I know Mr. Poilievre has laid out, the deficit target, the end of the industrial carbon price, and other measures. These do not seem like things the Liberals will meet. Or are able to meet. So where do things stand in your negotiations at this point?
Well, all I'm aware of is that we've made our requests public. We've spelled out how we believe that, for example, taking the industrial carbon tax off will help lower food prices, because then farmers won't have to buy equipment that's subject to that carbon tax. They won't have to buy fertilizer that's subject to that carbon tax. We've talked about scrapping the Liberal fuel standards that add 17 cents a litre to the cost of gasoline. We've made those requests public, and I know that my leader Pierre Poilievre has had a one-on-one meeting with Mark Carney where he's kind of laid that out. So they know what we would like to see in the budget. We haven't gotten an advanced copy of it, or they haven't, given us a sneak peek on various sections. So we're not sure what they're going to do with that. But we've certainly been very upfront and transparent on what we would like to see.
But the industrial carbon price is a very small part of the food inflation, right? According to a lot of the studies, it's somewhere between 0.5 to 0.8% of the increase, when it's been like 26% because of other global and climate factors.
Not global. If you're talking about food prices,
Sure.
prices are, food inflation is a direct result of government taxation and monetary policy. And that's been pretty well established.
Well,
we grow a heck of a lot of food here.
Sure.
We sell way more than we import when it comes to food. And so if prices are going up, it's because the government has devalued.
well, no, I mean, like the
Canadian
beef prices are up because of the drought several years ago, which led to less feed, which led to slaughtering of herds. There's just less, climate is affecting these things. Like it is a larger, there's larger inputs into the farm costs than just industrial carbon price, because most of it's exempt. 97% of it's exempt.
Well, there's still the carbon tax on heavy equipment, and every farm in Saskatchewan will have at least a combine, at least a tractor, several grain trucks. The fertilizer is still subject to that. We use a lot of fertilizer in Canada. And I would also say these things stack. The Liberals also brought in packaging regulations that our trading partners don't have, that are kind of not based on common sense. That adds to the price. The 17 cents a liter on gasoline also absolutely affects not just food, but everything else. So these are measures that we've said, look, when 2.2 million Canadians are lining up at food banks under this Liberal government, we should be doing everything we can to lower those food prices. We would like to see some movement on that. It wasn't normal in Canada. When you and I were growing up, David, I don't think we knew too many people who had jobs who had to go to food banks. Usually the types of people that you saw going into food banks were people who had lost their job or unemployed for a significant period of time. We're hearing reports now from food banks themselves that people with jobs are leaving work, stopping off at the food bank because they can't afford to go to the grocery store on their way home. So we're calling for concrete measures that will lower the price of food. We think that's reasonable.
Okay. But again, there's no indication they're going to meet it. It seems unlikely they're going to meet it, because what we've heard certainly on climate, while the emissions cap could be a casualty of the Carney administration, they do see industrial carbon pricing as a core component of meeting their climate goals. So that seems like it's here to stay. So if you don't get movement there, we had reporting earlier from JP Tasker and Kate McKenna that there's some conversations between your party and the New Democrats about finding a way to not trigger an election with maybe abstentions coming from the NDP. Now, Heather McPherson says she's not aware of any of that. You're the House leader. Are you aware of any of those conversations?
Well, I don't think you called me over here in this studio with all these lights and cameras to talk about what's going on in public policy for me to comment on rumors. We're focused in the next few days. Instead of talking about what might happen the day of, we're still fighting to get those common sense measures put into the budget. We'd like to see, on behalf of Canadians, so that Canadians can have an affordable life, we'd like to see the government present an affordable budget. What does that mean? It means stop the inflationary deficits. Everything in Canada under Mark Carney has gotten worse than Justin Trudeau. We've got higher tariffs from more countries. Youth unemployment is worse today. Housing continues to be a massive problem. More and more people visiting food banks. We still have a few days before the government tables the budget, so we're using all our time and efforts to try to get them to adopt our common sense measures.
But are there conversations with the NDP about what to do about this? Because I don't know if your party, you're probably in the financial position to have an election. I don't know if you want to have an election, and I don't know if the Liberals want to have an election, but you get into these stare downs in Parliament and things can happen that nobody really wants. So are there conversations happening with the New Democrats, as my colleagues are reporting? Our
conversations around Parliament Hill, whether it relates to things happening in committee or piece of legislation in the House, is always to try to get better results for Canadian people. That's how our conversations entail. When we think that there's a great amendment that will improve a piece of government legislation, we try to find other parties that will partner with us because we think it'll benefit Canadians. That's the nature of the conversations. We're still in the mode of trying to get an affordable budget for Canadians. We're not playing the kind of speculative game about if then that, or what if. We're still doing our job as Canadians elected us to hold this government to account, to highlight the failings that it has had, and then to offer concrete solutions to make life more affordable for Canadians.
You want the deficit kept to $42 billion, I believe is what it was in the fall economic statement last year. You've listened to what the Bank of Canada said this week and what the 5 big banks in Canada are saying this week. They think there needs to be government spending to juice the economy because of the structural damage damage being brought on by the tariffs coming from the White House. How could you get a deficit down to $42 billion? And I know that is an astronomically large number when there is this need to spend to jolt productivity and GDP in the face of what Trump is doing.
Well, first of all, everything I've heard from financial experts, from the independent parliamentary budget officer to the Bank of Canada governor, is that this government has a massive fiscal problem, and it's all related to spending. It's the delta between what the government takes in and what it spends. And all those deficits stack up year after year after year. And we are now in a position after 10 years of Liberal government where this government is spending more of your tax dollar. David, more of your tax dollar goes to service that debt. What does that mean? That means bankers and bondholders get paid the interest on the deficits that Liberal governments have been racking up. So that is the five-alarm fire that independent financial experts have been ringing to warn Canadians. There's a lot that you can do to stimulate the economy on the tax reduction side. Our leader has called for many things that would stimulate work, that would reward work, cutting taxes on work, cutting taxes on home building, rewarding people who take risk, cutting capital gains taxes on Canadians who reinvest in Canada to help strengthen our economy and put Canada first. So these are all concrete measures that can absolutely have positive economic outputs. You talk about the deficit, where do you find the savings for that? This government wastes billions of dollars. We've got a $30 billion infrastructure bank that doesn't complete projects. We've got billions of dollars going to consultants, all the way down to foreign aid programs that fund gender-just rice production in Vietnam. I don't know too many Canadians that benefit from that.
No, look,
there's a lot of areas that we can cut to bring those deficits down so that more of your dollars doesn't have to go to bankers and bondholders.
So Mr. Poilievre was asked earlier this week whether all of the MPs will vote as a bloc and vote against it. Will it be a whip vote for the Conservatives? You expect them to oppose this if they don't meet your conditions on carbon tax and deficit targets?
Well, despite what my NDP colleague said, we will wait and see what's in the budget. That's something that our leader has been clear. We've laid out what we'd like to see in the budget. We'll see what happens. We still have a few days to try to urge them. I hope it hasn't gone to the printers just yet. They might have some time to maybe put in a few edits if they finally see the light and realize that massive deficits year after year increase the cost for Canadians.
Just as the last 30 seconds, Mr. Scheer, your leader's going to give a speech tonight, a keynote speech in Toronto aimed at young Canadians titled No More Sacrifices. It's a youth event. Are we going to hear new policy from your leader or new proposals from Pierre Poilievre tonight? Or is it, I know he's been on this for a while, or is it a bundling of that narrative? What should we expect there?
Well, I don't want to scoop the specifics, but what you're going to see is a hopeful message. We saw Mark Carney do an address to the nation. It was very gloomy and very bleak, and telling Canadians who have had to sacrifice so much already, that they have to sacrifice even more. I don't know too many young Canadians who have had to move back in with their parents or who still can't find a job as youth unemployment hits 15%, that they believe, and none of them tell me that they feel like that they have more to sacrifice. They don't have anything left to give. They've been hit hard by these Liberal policies, and what Conservatives are going to say, what Pierre Poilievre is going to say tonight is, with Conservatives, you have a hopeful future. You can have the kind of quality of life that your parents had. That's what Liberals have robbed young Canadians. It used to be in this country that every generation could be confident that they'd have a better quality of life than their parents. Under this Liberal government, that dream has ended, but Conservatives are going to restore that.
Okay, Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer, thank you for your time today,
Thanks
sir.
very much,
We appreciate
David.
it.